Last on Everdark, Julian and Damon were having a wonderful time together. But now we turn back to Balthazar, who is not done with Fiona or Elizabeth yet. Everdark, Episode 56, Magic Words. Balthazar stood in the doorway of Fiona's room. He'd tried to put her in the dungeon. Arceus had overridden him, and she was to stay in a bedroom beside the confessors. Arceus was currently assuring himself that the staff had left the room spotless, as if they would have done anything else, while Balthazar and Fiona were conducting a stare-down. Fiona stood ramrod straight, her legs shoulders length apart, hands crossed at the wrists at the base of her spine. Her silver eyes didn't even seem to blink. For his part, Balthazar leaned against the threshold with his usual languid grace. His eyes were hooded, and not because he was still hung over from the corpse powder. He wanted to seem unconcerned yet menacing. It was a strange mix, and he wasn't sure he was pulling it off. But he continued to try in any case.
"Balthazar, don't you want to be with Christian?"
Arceus asked without turning around as he fluffed pillows. "He's with his parents." Balthazar's voice was clipped, which belied the languid pose. But maybe it's adding to the threat. Or maybe I just sound as brittle as I feel about it.
Well, maybe you want to check on Heath.
"Still dead and floating," Balthazar retorted. "And Ridley is taking care of her mistress, so nothing to be done there."
Perhaps then a meeting with the rest of the house about the status of things.
"Sent an intra-house text. Surely you got it. It's on one of those infernal devices you loathe, but it is there," he interrupted. What looked suspiciously like a smile curled Fiona's lips, as if she was amused by this back and forth between him and Arceus, but she quickly wiped it away, if it had ever been there. Arceus sighed and turned around to face him.
"You are hovering."
"Yes." Arceus frowned.
"That's not good."
He pushed off of the threshold and held up one hand. "It depends on whose viewpoint you're taking into consideration. Not allowing a prisoner to flounce about my home."
"I'm not flouncing. I don't flounce."
Fiona's voice was cool. "You're not here for the good of House Ravenscroft. You're here for yourself. If it would behoove you to betray us, you'd do it. So, flouncing or not, you should not be free." Balthazar responded just as coolly.
"Then why are you allowing me to be free?"
she asked. "Because when you betray us, I will be able to use this incident over Arceus's thick skull like a cudgel. He will never live it down, and he will have to accede that I was right. About you, and many things," Balthazar answered. Arceus looked mildly amused and irritated by his words. Fiona, though, was tense as a bow.
"I have nothing against House Ravenscroft,"
she said. "Bullshit. But fine. Okay. I'll take you at your word. The problem is that you have nothing for us either," he answered. "You take pride in the fact that you have no loyalty to anyone. To institutions, sure." He added that to cut off her objection. "But you're not loyal to people."
"Because people are changeable and make terrible mistakes. They are subjective, not objective. I stand by principles."
She straightened even further. "From where I'm standing, the only entity that you serve, the Order, is full of shit," he said. "All of it is a lie. We know that Kali and Seer and Damon and other immortals still live, so the war that the sacred texts claim happened in a certain way didn't happen that way at all."
"And you? You are Iros Reborn, so you are another of the immortals that, well, didn't survive but came back."
Her silver eyes narrowed. "Quite. And don't make that sound like a bad thing. I'm a good immortal, unlike Kali, who you have been working for all this time. You should think on that," he said grumpily, and then turned to Arceus. "I'll let you tuck her in, or whatever it is you're doing here, Arceus."
"I want to talk to her, to catch up."
Arceus told him with another raised eyebrow. Balthazar snorted. He wasn't sure if he was jealous that Fiona still held a piece of Arceus's heart or what, but Christian had sent him a mental nudge that said he needed some assistance escaping his parents. He turned and headed out of the door. Just as he'd taken a step outside, Fiona called after him.
"You're wrong about me, you know."
He looked back at her. She stood tall, proud, and defiant, but there was a little fragility in her, which he had never seen before, so the acidic quip he'd been about to fling at her died on his lips, and he said instead, "Prove it to me. Prove you aren't still the woman who stood by when the Order exiled Arceus and simply wrung her hands instead of joining him. Prove that you will actually stand up for people. Do that, and you're good in my book." He stalked down the hallway to where the thorns were being housed for the moment. But before he got halfway there, he saw Elizabeth standing outside Elena's room. Her forehead was puckered, and she was frowning. Alarmed that Elizabeth might go inside and Elena would react badly, Balthazar hustled down the hallway and whispered, "Elizabeth! Elizabeth!" Her head turned with a quizzical look on her face. When she saw it was him, she crossed her arms over her chest and raised her chin. He suppressed a sigh. She really was not fond of him. His charm bounced off her like she had literal shields. "What are you doing here, and not in your quarters?" he asked, wondering how she had come to be wandering here. She waved one hand vaguely.
I needed to walk, needed to move a little, be on my own.
He squeezed the top of his nose. Was Elizabeth just a little crazy? To walk around this house of vampires without any care in the world? Not that his people would have done anything to her, but still. "Well, I think it best if we go back to your room," he said, and gently took her elbow, leading her down the hall.
A woman is crying inconsolably in there.
He frowned. "Yes, that's Elena. She is the mistress of one of the fledglings who—" What could he say? The people who chased and tried to kill her son and Julian? Who was involved in the whole mess with the Order? Her fledgling was given his second death, so she is in mourning. Her frown deepened.
Second death?
Our first death is the one we lose when we become immortal. He should have used second life, not second death. Both terms were correct. But now she would think only of the negative. He silently cursed himself.
That's awful. She sounds like a mother who has lost her child.
Elizabeth shivered. Yes, it is a bit like that. Though Damon was in the midst of bringing Heath back to life when that fucking Callie came along and... Oh, right. You don't know what I'm talking about. And it would involve explaining bringing back the dead. That would likely not be a good subject.
Go back to the bit where you said Damon was bringing someone back to life. Full life, like mortal life.
She touched her chest. No, still as a vampire, he responded dryly. Julian and Christian are vampires forever, Elizabeth. You have to come to terms with this or...
Or what?
Her chin lifted. Again, he had seemingly walked into a verbal death trap. Where was his ability to read people and say the right thing at the right time? Evidently with Elizabeth it had run away from him altogether, but he could feel her thoughts. He resisted mightily reading them as he'd promised Christian that there would be no mind control. But he did know, if he lied to her now, that she would know, mind-reading ability or not, and it would be bad. Or maybe Damon's right, that you're a destructive influence. Despite his determination not to lie, Balthazar could not believe he was saying this. What about the charm? He should lay on the charm. But his mouth was moving and he wasn't aware of willing it to.
Destructive?
Her eyes widened. Julian and Christian must accept who they are now. There's no going back, so acceptance of their second life is crucial, he explained. There are vampires who won't survive if they won't feed. The moral qualms of drinking blood from mortals overwhelm them. It's a hard transition, and having a parent disapproving and wanting them back the way they were, well, that doesn't help.
I imagine it doesn't.
She crossed her arms tightly over her chest.
Intellectually, I see what you're saying, but emotionally? I feel you and Damon have stolen Julian and Christian from me, like thieves in the night.
How have we stolen them? Elizabeth, they would be dead, truly dead, and no longer reachable by you or Henry if they had not been turned.
Turned? Even that word makes them seem like turncoats, because they're no longer human. They feed on humans,
she said, her hands fisted in tight balls at her sides. Would you like to see some of the people we feed from? They live in the guest house. He pointed towards the back gardens. Confusion filled her eyes.
They live here. But don't you...
She made a helpless gesture with her hand. Kill them? No, not often. It's considered quite gauche if you do, he informed her.
Gauche?
She let out a thin laugh. With our gifts, handling a human should be easy. If you cannot feed from them without killing them, you are either weak or out of control. Neither is acceptable in vampire society, he told her.
So they live here and they know what you are and what you're going to do to them. Are they prisoners?
God, no, he laughed. What fun would that be? Unless you're a sadist or... Look, that's not what we are in House Ravenscroft. The only people here are the ones that want to be. She looked like she half believed him, but was still suspicious.
But your gift is the ability to read minds and change them, too.
He shrugged. I can charm anyone I want. Her eyebrows lifted.
But you haven't done this with Henry and me. Why?
He scrubbed the back of his neck and mumbled, Because Christian told me not to. She let out a laugh that was filled with genuine amusement.
I see that my son is already getting his way. It's amazing for someone so soft-spoken to be so stubborn. He can put his ears back and be an immovable force.
Oh, yes, and one scowl from him ruins my night, he admitted with a shrug. Her expression softened.
He's already gotten you wrapped around his little finger, then. That's what you want me to believe in any case, right?
I could make you believe I was the Queen of England right now, or that you are Jesus Christ, he told her simply. There would be no way that you would ever know what was real or what I placed in your mind, so I wouldn't bother using simple words to misdirect you.
And here I thought you wanted to impress me,
she said dryly. I did. I do. I could have you thinking I was brilliant.
When you aren't.
Her eyes twinkled a lot like Christian's at that moment. He let out a laugh. Touché, madame. But no, I am brilliant. Truly.
Yes, I bet you are.
And I would like to be your friend. She smiled thinly.
My brilliant friend.
Whatever kind of friend you want. He paused and went on. But I can't have you affecting Christian and Julian negatively. I want you and Henry as part of our lives. But if you persist in this negative behavior, well, I know you need time to accept this. It's been a shock, and with everything else going on, he shrugged. It's more difficult than usual.
I've always been a huge fan of audiobooks. I listen more than I read, since I'm on a screen all day to, write my stories. This is why I make every book published on Amazon into an audiobook, and I'm very selective about my narrators. I can tell who's just looking for work and will take anything that pays, and who actually understands and likes the story. You can find every audiobook, but Everdark, on Audible and Amazon. At this point, all my series are completed, including Cinders and Ashes, and they all have audiobooks available. Follow the link to my Amazon page.
Elizabeth's gaze went distant, and there was the faintest quiver of her lower lip. She firmed it, though her eyes were bright with unshed tears.
I didn't expect you to be so...
Forthright?
certain. You go from being the playboy to... well, I don't know what you are.
She brushed a hand over her eyes. It's easier to be thought of as empty-headed.
But you're not. Clearly, you're not.
She gestured helplessly.
I don't really know you. I just assumed.
You wouldn't be altogether wrong that I have played the jaded scamp. You must understand, my ability lets me know what anyone is thinking. I always know when people are lying, and I can find the truth out at any time if I want. He was explaining this as much to her as to himself. He pressed his lips together. When you always can know the truth, you understand the value of lies and facades, big and small. They make our interactions easier.
They also poison things. David...
I know what he did to Christian. Her eyes widened.
Did Christian tell you?
Of course. And no, I did not compel him to. I would never dare betray his trust that way, he said stiffly.
You have this sense of honor that perplexes me. You honestly seem like you're a good man. But I don't know how to square that with you being a predator.
She admitted. He leaned against the wall. They had stopped walking some time ago, only half a length from Elena's room, but she did not seem inclined to go back to her own room then. It's not an easy thing to square. Sometimes I can't square it, especially since I've learned some things about myself that, well, let's just say that how you view vampires is how I viewed immortals like Damon.
It's not just about you being a vampire. I can't even believe I'm saying the word.
But it's also David, right? You fear that I'm like him. That hurt to say, but he did understand it. They were both predators of a certain sort.
It sounds so selfish to say this, but it wasn't just to Christian that all of this happened. It was to all of us. He was our friend.
She beat her hand against her chest with sudden passion.
We trusted him with Christian. We thought...
She swallowed hard, but it looked painful, as if she was swallowing glass.
Christian has always been so quiet and thoughtful and separate from people, as if he's watching life instead of participating in it.
And David encouraged him to participate, Balthazar guessed, hating David a little more than he already did. She nodded.
Yes, he made Christian want to be present, and I hate him for that more than the rest of it because, you see, afterwards, Christian withdrew so far that I couldn't even reach him. Julian coaxed him out inch by inch, but he still holds people apart.
And you think it wise to question his choices about the people he lets in? He asked disbelievingly.
No, I just...
Elizabeth, I watched you. He pointed towards the dining room. I watched you undermine him again and again about his belief in me and Damon.
I didn't, I just...
She blinked the tears back, but she was rigid.
We have things and people that attract us, types, you know? Sometimes those types are bad for us.
I'm nothing like David.
How do I know that?
You just fear it. He shook his head. Things are difficult for you, for me, for Christian, for Julian.
You want me to give both of my boys up so that I'll make things less difficult?
She was already shaking her head. No. What I want is for both of us to stop acting out of fear and do what's best for the boys, he said simply. We have greater roles to play, and we need to inhabit those so that we are not letting our shit get in the way.
There's really no way back for them, is there?
She asked after a long moment of quiet contemplation. No, this is it. They are vampires. A single tear fell down her cheek. He reached out and after a moment's hesitation wiped it away. She sniffled and did not reject his touch. She grasped his hand and held it for a moment.
Your skin is warm,
she remarked.
I noticed nothing different about the boys except their eyes. But I thought, are you undead?
We're turned, changed into something new. But we're not like zombies or something, or even sleek corpses. We just aren't human anymore, he answered, which was as much as he really knew. Arceus knows more. Well, really, Damon knows everything, but he hasn't told us yet.
Why do you suppose that is?
I don't think it's a nefarious reason. He just doesn't quite view time the same way we do. Maybe in 1,000 years he'll drop some clues, Balthazar said with a shrug. Besides, it's sort of fun not to know.
So incurious.
Her tone was just as chiding as Christian's could be. Answers can be incredibly disappointing. When there are multiple possibilities, it's better, he explained.
I suppose that's true.
Growing serious again, he told her, I know there are parts of all of this that are going to be hard to accept. I know that there are going to be things that freak you out, but you're their mother, Elizabeth. You loved them before, no matter what. I believe you can love them now, no matter what. He told her with a certainty that he simply hoped was true.
Of course I love them. Of course I'll accept them. I just have to let go of the dreams I had for them and realize there is something else in store.
She said softly. Yes, big things in store, actually, he said. That's sort of double-edged, though, like the Chinese proverb where you wish someone lived in interesting times. She nodded, wiping away more tears, but smiling.
Yes, indeed. That is something you wish upon your enemies.
Well, we're all in the same boat. Now, Let me escort you back to your room. I'm sure that Christian and Henry are worried about you." He offered his arm. She took it. She busily wiped her face clean.
Is my makeup a mess?
"Actually, I think it's all washed away."
Oh, no.
"You look lovely. Don't worry," he said. The bedroom door was open. Christian, who had been sitting on the edge of the chair by the fireplace, sprang up.
"Mom, I was going to send a search party out for you in a minute."
Christian cried. She went right to him and cupped his face.
Don't be silly. I was fine. Balthazar and I were just talking.
Christian's gaze flickered to him and back to her.
"Oh, and that went well?"
She smiled at Balthazar.
It did. We had a nice talk.
About what?
Henry had come over to his wife at that same moment.
Just about the start of things. There's so much about being a vampire that I didn't know. So much to learn. I'm excited to find out more.
Her voice actually did hold a note of enthusiasm. Christian blinked, and the distinct worry that she was a pod person went through his mind. "I'm going to sick your mother on Damon. He might just give us some more answers if she's questioning him," Balthazar said as he leaned against the threshold. This time it wasn't to intimidate or look like he didn't care. This time, he just wanted to take in the family picture, and he liked what he saw. Suddenly, Sophia was beside him. She was dressed in cat pajamas, and she had a brush and 2 ribbons in her hands.
"Elizabeth?"
She said sweetly.
"I'm so sorry to interrupt, but..."
Balthazar had a momentary worry that Elizabeth would be repulsed by the child vampire. He'd seen it happen before, and he knew Sophia would be crushed by it. But there wasn't even a flicker of disgust in the woman. Instead, she warmly came and touched Sophia's shoulders.
What are you still doing up?
Elizabeth tutted.
Isn't it late? Or, near dawn?
"Almost time to sleep, but I was hoping..."
Sophia thrust the ribbons and brush at her.
"that you'd braid my hair into 2 pigtails."
Of course I will.
Elizabeth took the brush and ribbons and urged Sophia to the bed.
You need to be pretty for sleep.
Her gaze swung to her son.
Speaking of bedtime...
You're kidding. Mom, I'm old enough to...
Sophia's much older than you, and she understands that it's time to go to bed.
She indicated he should head out with Balthazar. Christian gave his mother a smile before he then kissed both her and his father on the cheek before joining Balthazar in the hallway. He waved good night. As they walked down the hall to their rooms, Christian put an arm through his.
You didn't use your mind control powers on her, did you, Balthazar?
Christian asked. I promised I wouldn't. I am a man of honor. Your mother recognizes that. He acted mock affronted.
Really?
But then Christian was laughing.
Well, whatever you did, even that, I'm glad. She was so distraught about everything.
She has a right to be, Balthazar said. But I think now she'll be looking at things differently.
What did you say?
Christian asked, his eyes full of curiosity. Balthazar leaned over and kissed his temple. Just that she loves you, and you need her. Those 2 things were all it took.
Magic words.
Christian was smiling and looked pleased. The tension had drained out of him. Magic words, indeed. Join us next time for episode 57, Die For You.
What about you? Do you listen more than you read? Do you prefer audiobooks to podcasts? Or do you listen to both? What else do you listen to other than Everdark? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear about your life.
The Everdark podcast by Ex Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thillis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing.